In Paris, the evening of Friday, November 13th was unseasonably warm. The famous bars and terraces of the 10th and 11th arrondissement were filled to overflowing with young people starting their weekend in a party atmosphere. Meanwhile, in the northern suburb of Bobigny, a group of young men load AK-47 Kalashnikov assault rifles and explosive suicide vests into their rented black car, a Spanish-made Seat. They departed precisely 8:48 p.m., heading for the bars downtown. The targeted bars and restaurants in the center of Paris were all within a 10-block area. A second terrorist car would move into position near the Bataclan concert hall, while a third group of terrorists were sent north of the city to the 80,000-seat Stade de France. At 9 p.m. on the night of the 13th, much of the country's attention was drawn to that stadium, where the French national team was about to play a friendly soccer match against Germany. The television audience was huge. French President François Hollande was in attendance, and so security was tight. The terrorists arrive at the stadium close to game time in a rented Renault Clio. 3 men wearing explosive vests get out near Gate D. They cross the street to the Events Brasserie, where one of them encounters Bilal Mokano.
Je lève la tête comme ça, et là je vois l'individu, bam, c'est claque. Le corps, je vois le corps partir en fait. Quand je vois le corps partir, je prends des morceaux de chair qui tombent un peu. Moi je pensais que c'était mon sang. J'étais blessé aussi en même temps. Je me suis dit peut-être c'est la blessure qui fait que le truc, non, c'était la chair humaine.
Explosion d'une bombe. À Event.
Bilal Mokano's retina was burned by the flash of the first explosion. He was rendered almost deaf. He stumbled around for a few minutes, then tried to help an injured woman find medical attention.
Je suis sorti avec cette dame. Quand j'ai porté cette dame, je me suis tourné, je suis sorti. Au moment de partir avec elle, on partit, boum, la deuxième explosion.
Deuxième explosion, Stade de France. Deuxième explosion, courez. Barrez-vous. Il y a des attentats.
Bilal Mokano was desperately looking for his missing 13-year-old son, Ryan.
Et je reviens, instinctivement, sur les pas, là où le terroriste a explosé. Et je me dis, Ryan, non, pas Ryan.
The third terrorist blew himself up blocks away outside a McDonald's restaurant. President Hollande was evacuated from the stadium. The Paris attacks of November 13th all occurred within a matter of minutes. As the suicide bombers were exploding at the Stade de France, the second attack wave was approaching the bars of the 10th and 11th arrondissement. The terrorists first pulled up at the corner of Alibert and Bichat streets and attacked 2 bars, Le Carillon and Le Petit Cambodge. In a hail of gunfire, they killed 15 people and wounded dozens more.
Il y a quelqu'un qui est arrivé avec une mitraillette et qui a commencé à tirer sur tout le monde.
The attackers then drove 2 blocks further and turned left onto Rue de la Fontaine-au-Roi, where they struck again at La Bonne Bière and the Casa Nostra Pizzeria. Security video shows a terrorist approaching the terrace to shoot a woman cowering under a table, but his gun malfunctions, and she survives. There was carnage outside La Bonne Bière. The terrorists raced several blocks further, turning into the Rue de Charonne on their way to La Belle Équipe. Nina was just leaving the terrace as the terrorists approached. She asked us not to use her last name.
I went outside to smoke a cigarette with one of my colleagues, and then we went back inside, and we were I had the time only to take a picture, and then they started shooting at us.
Ça tire, gros. Ça tire, recule.
A limousine driver was approaching La Belle Équipe from the other direction on the Rue de Charonne. His dashboard-mounted camera caught the sounds of the attack.
Je les vois, ils sont devant. Qu'est-ce qui tire? C'est un attentat, tu crois?
At first, I thought it was like fireworks, and I was like, I'm gonna stand up and tell them to stop it because I'm scared. I'm gonna tell them I'm scared, so we have to stop it right now. And after like 30 seconds, I realized it was not fireworks. So we just all fell down on the ground, and we're just like trying to hide ourselves.
Putain, ça tire sec.
Out in the street, the limousine driver's camera caught the moment when the shooting finally stopped,
Ah, je suis en stress.
and the terrorist car speeds away.
Ils sont où? Ils sont là dans cette voiture là. Tu crois? Ouais.
The driver then races up to the front of La Belle Équipe.
Ils ont tiré sur 2 mecs là. Putain, sa mère, vas-y gros, c'est chaud. Oh là là.
The noises stopped, and someone started screaming like, "You can stand up." They left. It's this exact minute you start looking around you and you realize what happened. Like, you realize that most of the people did not stand up like you did. And then I opened the door, and I looked at the people outside, and they looked all dead. Like, they looked all dead. And there was a girl on the floor at the exact place I was just before they started shooting, actually. She was on the floor, and her mobile was still ringing and ringing and ringing. And you realize this girl is never going to pick up.
The limousine driver recorded this scene on the terrace outside La Belle Équipe. Men ripped off their shirts to make tourniquets to stop the bleeding.
When I saw that girl laying on the floor at the place, I was smoking a cigarette 30 seconds before they attacked the bar. And at this time, you're just wondering, am I this girl laying on the ground? Or am I here? Like, where am I actually? Did I survive? Is it my phone ringing? And it takes you maybe 1 minute to realize you're alive. And even now, sometimes I wonder, did I survive? Am I still here?
"19 were killed at La Belle Équipe.
When I cross this place here, I don't see.
Up the street from La Bonne Bière and Casa Nostra, Dr. Michel Bonneau heard the sounds of shooting from his nearby apartment and rushed down to the scene of carnage.
And I rushed to this corner, yeah. And
was there much noise in the street? Was
no. The noise was strange, very, very quiet, silence, total silence. And the table were down. There were a lot of blood, glass. The 2 men were dead. And I examined a young lady. She was speaking a little bit, and she was breathing. And I saw another lady. She was no breathing, no pulse. And we made CPR on mouth to mouth, yes, waiting rescue.
Dr. Bonneau appears in a photo taken that night. He felt it took forever for the emergency services to arrive at the Bonne Bière.
For me, it was a long time, of course. Perhaps 15 minutes, I don't know. I don't remember exactly. It's true that it was very long indeed. You feel alone, you know.
Dr. Bonneau was not able to save his patient, 37-year-old Lucy Dietrich.
Elle avait un visage assez calme en fait, assez serein. Pas, vous savez, les morts parfois, ils ont des visages effrayés, ils ont vu des choses, on le voit dans leurs traits, dans leurs yeux. Non, là, elle a été assez calme. Bon, voilà, donc je vais fermer les yeux.
You could hear the police, the firemen, the people screaming outside. It was like Paris was bleeding and it was Paris screaming actually. You had like this strong feeling that Paris is screaming.
When we come back, the terrorists move on to their main target in Paris, the Bataclan Concert Hall. The main target for the terrorists in Paris on November 13th was the Bataclan Concert Hall. This video recorded inside that night shows the band Eagles of Death Metal performing. There were only unarmed security guards. The third team of terrorists arrived at the Bataclan in the Volkswagen Polo around 9:45 p.m. The attackers opened up with their AK-47 assault rifles. Didi, the head of security at the Bataclan, does not wish to show his face on TV.
J'entends des coups de feu. Je vois des rafales sur la terrasse du Bataclan Café et à l'entrée principale du Bataclan. Donc je vois des personnes touchées. Je comprends tout de suite que c'est une attaque d'assassins, de terroristes.
The attackers shot numerous people in the entrance area, then moved into the concert hall itself. Charles Nadera was upstairs in the balcony.
We heard crackers, and we thought it was part of the show. We looked at each other and we were like, is it part of the show? Is it for real?
Jean-Pierre Beteli was a security guard downstairs in the Bataclan.
C'est vraiment un mouvement de panique, un mouvement de guerre. On voit les gens traîner d'autres gens, ça on voit. Donc là ils tombent tous, plusieurs dizaines je dirais, je ne sais pas exactement combien. Et je vous dis, il y en a un qui tombe vraiment à côté de moi, pratiquement sur moi, et c'est celui-ci que je veux le ramasser, mais celui-ci était déjà mort en fait.
We did not see any escape, we were trapped. There was no window, nothing. So we just had to lie down, and we heard shots, we heard screams.
Quand j'ai vu qu'ils commençaient à recharger leurs armes et qu'il y en a un qui... J'entendais des bruits de marche, je me suis dit peut-être qu'il montait au balcon. Je me suis levé et j'ai crié que c'était le moment de sortir. Je suis sorti dans la petite rue. Pas mal de gens sont sortis avec moi. Ils ont continué à tirer ensuite.
Je suis allé à la fenêtre voir ce qui se passait parce qu'on n'entend pas beaucoup quand la fenêtre est fermée.
Le Monde journalist Daniel Pseni was at work in his apartment across the alleyway beside the Bataclan.
Et donc la porte de secours elle est à 20 mètres. Et là ce que je voyais c'était terrible. C'était des gens qui tombaient, des cris, la peur, la violence, les coups de feu, les appels au secours. J'ai entendu quelqu'un qui appelait. Oscar! C'était un père qui cherchait son fils. Je me demandais qu'est-ce qui se passe.
S'il vous plaît, qu'est-ce qui se passe? Hein?
Minutes later, the first police begin to arrive at the Bataclan. They were not equipped to deal with well-armed terrorists. Most had only handguns. One of the attackers was shooting at them from a second-floor window.
les gens qui tombaient, qui sortaient du Bataclan, qui étaient abattus avec une balle dans le dos, puisque de fait ils sortaient, ils tombaient. D'autres qui traînaient leurs amis par terre avec plein de sang et qui hurlaient. Bon, c'est là où on voit qu'il se passe quelque chose de très grave.
A central role at the Bataclan was played by the survivor Sébastien, who also prefers to remain anonymous.
Je me suis retrouvé dans une voie sans issue où il y avait 2 fenêtres. Alors j'ai regardé vers la fenêtre et j'ai vu qu'il y avait trop de hauteur pour sauter. Et donc je me suis réfugié bêtement dans une bouche d'aération avec les pieds dans le vide. Et c'est là où j'ai vu la femme qui était pendue à la fenêtre et qui demandait aux gens qui passaient en bas, qui fuyaient, de la rattraper. Elle voulait se jeter. À un moment, elle dit qu'elle va lâcher, donc dans ce cas-là, on ne peut pas regarder quelqu'un mourir sous ses yeux, il y en avait déjà eu trop. Donc je suis retourné dans le couloir qui donnait vers la salle et puis j'ai tendu ma main.
Daniel Pisani went down to the front door of his apartment building to rescue a bleeding American named Matthew and was shot himself.
C'est ici là, que la balle a été tirée, après m'avoir traversé le bras, elle a atterri dans le mur. Et donc j'appelle ici le voisin pour lui dire je suis blessé, et avec Mathieu qui est allongé ici par terre et qui attend. Et j'ai enlevé ma chemise, je fais un garrot, j'essaye, mais voilà, on est dans la panique là. Et le sang a jailli d'un coup. Et de fait, Mathieu, qui était par terre, à un moment donné, il a senti, comme il était en hypothermie, il avait très froid, il a senti une chaleur sur son dos qui l'a réconforté, parce que c'était mon sang qui le réchauffait en fait.
There is controversy about the police response. Local cops outside the Bataclan were screaming for the heavily armed police intervention squad that uses bulletproof helmets and shields.
Les casques, le bouclier, putain!
But those police would take over 2 hours to get into the Bataclan and fight the attackers.
Ils sont tous arrivés assez tard. Pour nous, c'est toujours trop tard, de toute façon. Puisque quand même, les personnes, on les appelait, ils sont en train de mourir à nos pieds. D'ailleurs, certains sont morts.
Sortir encore dans le secteur reculé.
The police would not allow medical personnel into the Bataclan or even neighboring buildings to treat people, some of whom were bleeding to death.
C'est très angoissant. Si ça dure trop longtemps, on n'y arrivera pas. Mais là, il y a pas une absurdité, mais quasiment, en se disant, là, il y a toute la police, il y a tous les secours, il y a toutes les ambulances, les pompiers, et personne ne peut venir nous prendre.
The terrorists and their hostages were in a long, narrow corridor on the second floor of the Bataclan. Just after midnight, police from the anti-gang squad finally moved into the corridor with a protective shield and advanced on the terrorists' position. The shield was hit with 27 bullets. One terrorist was shot. They then both exploded their suicide vests. Miraculously, none of the hostages were killed. By 12:30 at night, it was all over. At the end of the carnage, 130 people were dead. Hundreds were injured, and one of the most open-minded and liberal cities in the world was shaken to its core. When we come back, the aftermath. While the government of France tries to anticipate and prevent the next attack, Parisians are still struggling to get over what happened on November 13th. Dr. Michel Bonneau, who tried to save lives at the Bonnebière Café, says he has encountered many cases of post-traumatic stress in Paris.
Même moi, il y a des émotions qui sont très difficiles à contrôler. Je veux dire, alors, imaginez les autres personnes. Il y a des sauveteurs qui sont venus me voir en essayant de faire quelque chose. Il y en a un, je lui ai dit, surveille la dame, parle-lui, elle est morte entre ses mains. À Paris, il y a eu donc des milliers de gens traumatisés, de gens qui n'ont pas été blessés, des survivants, des rescapés de ces endroits-là, des gens à peine blessés, mais qui ont eu la terreur de leur vie.
Il y avait un type qui avait pris une balle de Kalachnikov en pleine bouche. Et il était assis, il avait la tête en arrière, il avait la bouche qui ressemblait plus à une bouche. Et ça faisait des bulles de sang, quoi. Et il y avait du sang qui coulait. Et j'ai eu un temps d'arrêt, je me suis approché de lui, et on voyait bien que ses yeux imploraient. Fais quelque chose, sauve-moi. Ce sera en fait le seul visage qui me reste en tête, vraiment, parfaitement.
Bilal Mokano's arm was wounded in one of the explosions at the Stade de France. He keeps reliving the moment when he was separated from his 14-year-old son, Ryan, just as the blast occurred.
Mais quand on se retrouve avec mon fils et que je lui dis « Papa, il t'aime, mon fils. Il te protégera toujours, il sera toujours là. Il te protégera, mon fils. Je t'aime, mon fils. » Quand on s'est pris dans les bras, il m'a dit « Moi aussi, je t'aime, papa. » J'ai eu peur que ça soit toi par terre, papa.
Nina, who survived the shooting at La Belle Équipe, went back 2 days later to look at the flowers and memorials that had been deposited on the sidewalk in front of the cafe.
I fell on the ground and I started crying, and I had, you always have this guilt, you feel guilty because you can see all the pictures of the people who died and you're like, why not me? Why not me?
While many Parisians have returned to the famous terraces in a show of defiance, there is also a feeling of dread, thinking about the last attack, worrying when the next one will come. For The National, I'm Terence McKenna in Paris.